Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to another DM's Guild review, my written and video review series, where I take a look at the adventures and supplemental material at the Dungeon Masters Guild website. With this video, I'll be reviewing the DM's Guild Magic Item Compendium Calpurnia's 101 Lesser Magical Items, designed by Joel Kelley for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. A review copy has been provided for the purposes of this review. If you enjoy my videos, consider supporting me via patreon.com/roguewatson. Personal shoutouts to my platinum patrons Andrew and Brian, gold patron RPG Papercrafts. Thank you so much for your support. So we flip on over to me. There I am. So I love Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Obviously, we've been playing it for quite a while. The only thing I don't like about it compared to previous editions is that because players are so much stronger now, like inherently stronger, the stat boosts and everything is just baked right in there upon leveling up, the proficiency bonuses and everything. So it's way less of a loot-based game, which is good in a lot of ways. But I like loot. I come from very much like a video game background, the Diablo-style hack-and-slash games. I adore all of those. And I don't necessarily need that level of loot, but there is kind of that. Loot is not nearly as necessary as it was in older editions. Like, you just had packed on, like, everything you wore was a different magical item, and you had all these magical stuff, and that was kind of like, that was your power as a character. Whereas now the characters themselves are much more powerful, and just the very few items, you can only attune 3 items, kind of make you even more powerful, almost unbalancedly so. And the Dungeon Master's Guide provides a lot of good magical items. There's good stuff in there for DMs, certainly, but and this complaint has been used for years now since the DM's Guild came out, and that most of the items are rare or higher, which means the players are not supposed to actually have that many of them at all. So a big problem is that we don't have a lot of items for lower level players, and it's fun to give people magic loot. That's a cool reward. Gold becomes such a almost forgettable thing unless your campaign has some kind of way of, some economy or way of getting the players to spend gold. But for the most part, players like magic items because those are, you can immediately turn around and use those, and it's fun. It's a cool thing to give players. But there's a dearth of magical items for those lower levels, and a lot of people are playing lower levels a lot more than the higher levels. Like, look at every published adventure is, starting at level 1 and ending at level, 10 or 12 or something. So it's that we need more items for that. And that's something that Wizards has done. They released, I believe it was Xanathars, that had a bunch of, like, more common and uncommon rated items to help kind of solve that. Just even if they're not really powerful, but just simple things like, think about in the was it Hobbit or Lord of the Rings, where he pulls the sword out and all it does is glow when, like, orcs are nearby. Like, that's not super powerful, but it's still a cool magic item. Like, things like that are really cool. So what this does is it gives you that. It is a bunch of magical items designed specifically for those lower levels. I would say specifically like tier 1 into tier 2, which is that level 1 through 4, and then like the 5 through 9, which is great because I think that's where the majority of D&D is played. And I think this one goes even above and beyond that because it does some really fun things. Every single item has variants listed. So although there's 101 here, each one you can add basically different traits to, and I'll go over that in a second, to give them different abilities or additional abilities, or even a lot of them have a variant that they are cursed in some ways, which offers an interesting kind of twist and a balancing measure to certain items. And sometimes that does raise their rarity if they're particularly, if that makes that item a lot more powerful, so there's a nice bit of balancing there. I also feel like it does a good job of actually using the player character's modifiers and some of their skill checks. So like there might be a dagger that uses the player's like sleight of hand skill in order to see how many charges it has for its ability or for its attack roll or something like that. Which I never really saw that in any of the DMG stuff. They never seemed to really care about what the player stats were. Or something might be like this item works out to this times the player's like wisdom modifier. Like that stuff's really cool and rewards players for having those high stats, and obviously, you can marry those players to those certain items and weapons when they first find it. Be like, oh yeah, you've got the highest of whatever. You should probably have this item. You'll get the most out of it. So I like that quite a bit. And I guess we can go ahead and start taking a look. And I think how I'm going to review this is I'm just going to go through and look at some of my kind of standout favorite items. I'm not obviously going to go through everything here. But I just want to give kind of examples of what you're going to get. The first thing you'll see, the other thing I want to mention, is usually I do this in read mode, or at least I should do these in the read mode just to blow it up a little bigger, make it look nicer. But here, I didn't because I want to show you that there is an actual bookmarks here, which is amazing. You've got, for the PDF, there's a bookmark of every single item that this offers. So you just click on one of these, and you can instantly go to that item, which is friggin' amazing. Like, that really goes above and beyond in how to organize this thing. I don't even think there's a table of contents at the beginning because you don't need it if you've got this. Yeah, I actually think there is a table. Yeah, there it is. Of course there is. But and you could do that. Obviously, you can type in the page number. But having this bookmark over here, man, that's super thumbs up to that. I love that. I don't think I've ever seen people use bookmarks in a PDF, at least to this extent, where it's every single item is listed, so you can bump around real quick like. And the other thing I like is that because it is, Calpurnia's compendium. So it is written from the voice of this, I guess she's a mage. And they do a fun thing, kind of like the Xanathars, where, and then Valos, like, it takes, it's inspired from what Wizards does with their compendiums, which is you add in that nice little flavor of an actual character putting this together. And that makes it a much more fun read for DMs who are actually reading this. It's not just abilities and things like that, which that can be fun. I enjoy reading that. I like magic items and loot is fun. But what makes it really enjoyable is having this character's voice pop in there. And I feel like, you know her based on what she's writing, which is this kind of like college professor, like very erudite and professional, like voice being written. And it can be kind of funny in times, and just it's very informative. And a lot of times they actually, because of the way she writes it, she will literally like give you strategies on how to use this item in a fun way, which is really, really nice. Because I was like looking at something going, okay, why is this good? And then I read the flavor text, I was like, oh, okay, that makes a lot of sense. That's cool then. That's a great example. And I can show you that example, which I believe was the autonomous armor. Which is a neat idea. So on this one, it's basically, you've got an animated, it's a rare armor, so it's actually one of the probably stronger items in here. It's essentially an animated armor, which is a monster in the monster manual that you can command, which seems great, but you can also wear the armor as a suit of plate mail, and it's a command word that activates the armor. And it even says that if you're wearing the armor when it animates, it acts on your turn. Otherwise, you roll initiative for the armor, which has its own turns. But only if you're wearing the armor, only one of you can be in control, and you literally have to make like strength checks to see who wins, which is kind of funny. And I'm like, okay, that's weird. Why would you have this armor that you have to like roll strength checks against? And then the flavor text says, more commonly, adventurers wear this as their main suit of armor. If terrible circumstances arise, paralyzed by a ghoul, charmed by a dryad, or just beaten unconscious by an orc, a comrade can shout the command word. The armor can then be ordered to help win the fight, or to march off with the fallen soldiers safely encased inside. That's a great example of like, oh, okay, I can see where this would be useful. The armor can continue to fight even when you're knocked out, as long as they know the command word. But then the final paragraph says, a warning, be careful who you trust with the command word. This is not something you want your enemies to know, because then they could suddenly turn on your auto. It reminds me of, gosh, what was it? Like, was it the DuckTales that had the armor that could go on there that they had to fight? I feel like there's something like maybe some cartoon kind of played with this, where they had a suit of armor that kind of had its own sentience to it. But that's a really fun idea, and I like that a lot here. And that's got some variants. The one I want to use for variant example is this one, the blindfold of true sight. Is a neat idea. This is like I call these the Illidan like handkerchief. You literally put on this blindfold, and it blinds you, but you gain true sight out to 30 feet. And then upon removing it, you actually have to take a short or a long rest in order to get your sight back. So you can't just move it off and on. But there's a lot of interesting variants here. So you can have it be cursed, where the blindness is not ended. You're just blinded from then on, unless somebody obviously casts a remove. What is the? It's like lesser restoration, I think. Yeah. Another variant is that the range of the true sight is no longer 30 feet. Instead, it is 15 feet times your wisdom modifier, which is a nice. Again, that's that kind of using the actual player character's stats to fuel like how good a certain item is, or like who would be well to use it. Because obviously, this is kind of like a monk type item. But it doesn't say it has to be attuned by a monk. It's just saying like, hey, you could use this to reward a player for having just really good wisdom and have that work even better for them. You could just say the range of the true sight is doubled, but that increases the rarity of one category. So there's a lot of, right there, there's different options for using this base stat block to kind of explain different ways to use the same item. And there's so many, I think every single item, or almost every item, has multiple variants like that, including cursed variant. Almost all of them have cursed variants. The designer really liked to have a lot of cursed items on there. And not all of them are like horribly horrible. There's some that are very interesting. I'm going to go skip to, let's see, the Periapt of Wild Shape seemed particularly interesting. There we go. Alright, so this is like a collar, and you could affix, I think, 3 different remains of a beast on there, and that would give you, let's see what it do. It increases your challenge rating that you can wild shape into. Obviously, it's attunable only by Druid by 1, or doubles, whichever is lower. And then it has just, look at all these variants it's got. You can have it be like just of the fin, of the wing, so that means you can transform into swing or flying creatures far earlier than you normally would. Or just certain creatures, like of the ooze, of the plant, so that would open your wild shape up to being able to transform into slimes and plant monsters. Variant of the Outsiders, you can, which means non-druids could gain wild shape benefits, which is pretty cool. Or the Cursed variant, which means while cursed, your wild shape has no time limit. You cannot voluntarily end wild shape, and it doesn't end if you fall unconscious or remove the Periapt. If you revert to your normal form as a result of dropping to 0 hit points, your normal form also drops to 0 hit points, and you are dying. You are straight up, like, basically cursed with lycanthropy at that point. Like, you cannot transform out of your wild shape. That is a nasty curse that almost transforms that entire item into something entirely different. Which seems really interesting, and the notes here, again, the Calpurnia's notes are saying, like, this could be a way for a druid of a different region, finding this collar that's got these exotic creatures that they would never normally be able to see or transform into, and that would give them access to it. That's just the base level. Again, telling you kind of an example of why this item is useful and how you can use this particular item. Let's see, what was puncturing weapon I wrote down as a good example for... Okay, this is the sleight of hand weapon. So the weapon has a number of charges equal to your dex modifier. If you are proficient in sleight of hand, you can add your proficiency to the number of charges. So that's an excellent example of how it uses the player's... that one is a skill and the modifier. And that particular item, you can actually... You choose how many charges you want to spend, and then you can subtract. This one gets a little fiddly. You can subtract from 20 minus the number of charges spent, and then that gives you... Hang on, I'm completely confusing this one. However many charges you use is how better of a critical hit you can score. Okay, that's what the minus 20 is. So like if you spend 3 charges, you can crit on either a 17, 18, 19, in addition to the 20. So it opens your critical hit chance. And obviously with those you can use any kind of weapon. And a lot of the things here are, you can use this with any weapon or any armor, that kind of thing, which is very nice. There was like a bifurcating weapon that was just one big weapon that you could say a command word and split that into 2 weapons. So that's the variant, of splitting into 2 swords from Warcraft. Which I really like that idea. It's not even like magical weapons, although it says in... I can look on that one. It says on there that, you can then add, whatever you want to make them magical. There we go. And there's different examples here. So a long sword becomes 2 short swords. A great club becomes 2 clubs. A spear can become 2 javelins. Or you can even do like an asymmetrical one, which is a variant. It's split into 2 different weapons as determined by the DM. For example, a long sword might split into a short sword and a dagger. And that's just really neat. They say you can... It's not unusual for an artifact makers to be creative with bifurcating weapons by adding extra magical enchantments. Sadly, they often not resist clever paired names like Thunder and Lightning or Hope and Faith, with each weapon having different properties related to its gaudy name that combine in some way when joined. I really like these flavor text additions on there. What was the crystal one? That one had me literally laughing. Crystal assistance. This is like literally just a sentient, like almost like a companion app or something, like a little floating iPad. Sentient items with intelligence of 20, wisdom of 10, charisma of 1. And they can record. They have extremely dry personalities, not dissimilar to the obedient personalities found in magical constructs. And it just follows you around and has perfect memory and can record everything for you. And she says, let's see. Yet I can also ask it questions that require analysis, such as, did I find similar digestive tracts in both the Grick and the Carrion Crawler? Yet I can't ask in which set of formal robes best complement my eyes, or what gift to bring to a colleague's dinner party. That's absolutely fantastic. Several of my students have objected to applying the term sentient to this item. At its most dull, pedantic level, they are probably correct. I've heard rumors of wizards using the imprisonment spell to store souls in crystal assistants as a means to give them more authentic personalities. If true, it's unethical. It also seems bizarre. Why taint such a useful servant with such foibles? So right there you can get a taste of this person's personality. And this is not an adventure. This is just a compendium of magic items that would be normally perfectly serviceable and fine, but I really think that these little yellow text box, which is her voice, adds really a lot to being able to read it and having fun with it, but also being informative about telling you like how to use all these different items in a really, really fun way. And some of them are, honestly, none of them, I didn't read every single one of them, to be honest. There's 100 items in here, but none of them did I say, oh yeah, that's meh. It's like when you have this many items, obviously you're going to like some more than others. Even if you only fall in love with a few of these, like the fact that there's 100 in here means you are pretty much guaranteed to fall in love with at least a few of these. Some of them are very, very simple. One of them was literally this cloak of colors. It's just a cloak, and you can speak a command word to just change its color. And that's it. That's the whole thing. Just a cloak that you can change color. And that's something that's really easy to give, a level 1 or a level 2 player as an easy reward. And that player can have fun with it. And, certain players are going to like those certain items more than others. Some of them are just going to want things that kill people, but, something like that, a player could have fun with that, role-playing that for the rest of their character's career. They could walk around and just say, red, and it's just this brilliant red cloak, and I love that. There's a lot of good flavor in here that players can use. So I have basically no complaints about this. I feel like my only complaint is exceedingly nitpicky, which is that it's on plain white paper. That's so nitpicky. Like I prefer the kind of either gray or sepia tone, as a background, just slightly easier on the eyes. But that's so nitpicky. I mean, it's got all the right font. I think it's that Scaly Sans font that Wizards uses. It's got pictures, not a lot of pictures, but I didn't expect it to have a lot of pictures either. Even the official, DMG, they don't have a picture for every single item, and this one has, less than that, but it's a ratio that I was pretty comfortable with. I'd say it's about in the minimum of what I was expecting, which is about a picture every other page, I think, as it averages out at. It would have been nice to maybe have a page or two of just full kind of groupings of items. Would have been nice to have just a bit more art, but honestly, I'm not even putting that as a con at the end, because I think there's enough here to where I don't really have a complaint about it. And the same thing with the white paper. I mean, that's such a nitpicky thing. Like, yeah, it would have been nice, but honestly, the format is great. The actual font is great. They've got the dice boxes for if things have multiple. If you want to be able to roll for multiple traits on an item, like all of that is perfectly well done and perfectly serviceable. So, my quick pros and cons. This will be a pretty quick review compared to my last one, because this is not a full 130-page adventure. Pros: PDF bookmarks for every single magic item entry. That is absolutely fantastic. Look at this organization. You could not ask for better organization if you needed to look something up quickly in a PDF. Pro: many items actually care about a PC skill level or modifiers. That's really not something I'd seen before in magic items at all, to where they actually cared about, and a lot of them, it's, I'm looking at one right now, this Ring of Mirror Image. This ring has charges equal to your charisma modifier. That's great. Like, that's really cool. And that also has an interesting way of having those items grow with the player, because players can obviously alter their modifiers through either other magic items or through gaining those ability score improvements every 4 levels. So that's a really cool way of making an item actually kind of scale with the player. So I think that's fantastic. Pro, every item has several variant traits that can be added for even more options. You can see we went through several of these that have all kinds of variants listed, and a lot of them are cursed, which I think is a really fun twist to put on there. Like that Collar of Wild Shape, where suddenly, yeah, you can do this and it gives you extra power, but you're also going to be stuck in your Wild Shape form. That's a little evil, and it can be a little cruel to put cursed items in a low-level player, but that also is a way you can give somebody a more powerful item to a lower-level player if that item has some kind of debilitating effect that balances it out. And my final pro is that Calpurnia herself has a fun college professor-like voice to comment on items throughout the compendium. As I mentioned, I really like these, and they are very frequent. More frequent, I think, than like what Volo's and Xanathar's comments were, frankly, throughout their respective books. I think this one is like almost every other item. I think has, you can see all these yellow boxes in every single page is that. Okay. Which is great. I think that's fantastic. Cons, I got nothing. I really my cons would be just very nitpicky. I don't think I can be comfortable listing any cons. This gives me pretty much exactly what I want in a great format, and it's fun to read. Which brings me to my verdict. Calpurnia's 101 Lesser Magic Items is the perfect shopping list of fun, varied magic items for your lower level characters. Thank you to everyone for watching this video review. You can see my written review at roguewatson.com. You can support my work at patreon.com/roguewatson. You can follow our own D&D adventures here on my YouTube channel. Thank you.